So today we'll learn about Docker network. Okay. So by default, there is a bridge network. Okay. We can also create our custom networks. And in terms of naming and discovery, uh, Docker has an internal, you can say a small DNS, which we cannot see, but it's possible to refer each container, means each Docker container with names, and that's why it's here written here. We can reference container, each other containers by name. And there are four types of connection options available. That is, you can say in short, there are four types of networks possible in Docker. One is bridge, other one is overlay, host, and none. Bridge means so generally we install Docker on any VM, right? So that is called as a single host networking on the same host. So we can create multiple bridge networks, or there will be a single bridge network on which all the containers can communicate on the same host. But suppose there are two multiple hosts on which the Docker containers are running. In that case, we can use overlay type of networking. And host means it will use the same host network of the VM itself. So for bridge and host network, we'll have an exercise. Then it will be more clear what is host and what is the bridge network. Overlay we are not covering, that is host cross host communication. So if you go through the exercise, there will be a next exercise. So just a simple networking part we are covering here. So if you do sudo docker network ls, so these are the three default networks which are created by default. Okay. Bridge, host, and none. None means there will be no network. So these are three networks which are created by default. Now we'll be creating our own network. Okay. So let me share the exact link. The the so this is the first one exercise, and the next exercise also I'll paste it here. So these two exercises we are doing today.
So can you just give us the use case where exactly it is being used?
Yeah, we'll cover the exercise, then it will be more clear. But in production, I haven't used this. Okay, means very less usage, because we'll be learning more about Kubernetes. The Docker, as I said, is mostly used nowadays for building a container, Docker build command, and pushing the container to the container registry. This is the main usage as I have seen most of the times. Okay, but we should know what is network and all in case it's required. So what we'll do is we'll create a container in a Docker host network. One of the Docker host network is one of the networking component, you can say. So as you can see by default, this is the default network, that is bridge, host and null. These are the three networks which are created by default. And let's make sure that port 80 is not in use, because we'll be using a Docker host network. In this case, we'll be making it run on the host itself. Till now what we were doing is we were mapping port 80 of the container with any other port like 8080 of the host network, but in this case we'll be running the container on port 80 itself. So this is possible using Docker host network. So we'll need this nettools command just to make sure that port 80 is not in use. We'll just check it. Okay. So there is just a connection, it is not in use till. Sudo systemctl status httpd. We don't have httpd or nginx running. These are the two services which uses port 80. And if you see the output of netstat, okay, port 80 is not in use. Some connection is established, but still it's not in use. So we won't use other parameters, just the network parameter. So what we are doing is we'll be running an httpd container, okay, running it in a detached mode, not binding any port -p and all, or not even binding volume, any volume to it using -v, but just a network. We are defining that create a container in a host network. Host network means on this VM itself, and just do enter. And if you see port 80 now, if you see, it is running properly on port 80. TCP6 means it is running on IPv4 and 6 both. Okay, so just do curl localhost and we can see a simple web page is accessible. Sudo docker ps. So this container, there are some containers, let me remove them first, otherwise will. Docker ps -a sudo docker stop. Sudo docker rmi. Just rm. Sudo docker images. So the cleanup is done. So let's run the container again. Okay, so we are running a container called httpd in a detached mode, and we'll assign a host network. Host network means the network of VM itself. Now before running it one more time, netstat -antu grep port 80. Okay, port 80 is not at all in use. We'll also do curl localhost. Okay, by default we don't have to use port 80 after colon. Okay, now we'll run the container. So just downloading the image, we removed all the images.
So we are running the Docker and creating the container, right?
Yes. So the Docker container is created. If you see Docker PS, okay, and see here the ports are not defined. We haven't defined any ports. We haven't done any mapping here. Just to curl localhost. Okay, it's showing. That means the container is directly running on the VM's network. Now, if you do netstat again, just do the netstat, you can see the port 80 is in use. So to call 192 168 200.11 is my IP address. It will show. So on interfaces, it's using the host network. This is not recommended, but just to check how to use the host network, uh, I've given this example. Okay. So the next, so what we'll do is now just stop this container, sudo docker stop container ID, and if you do curl local curl, it will not work because the container is stopped. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll remove this container again, sudo docker ps hyphen a sudo docker rm, so that it doesn't interfere again with the next exercise. Sudo docker images sudo docker rmi image id. Okay, so first was host network. Let's create now the bridge network. Everything is clear, so we'll perform the next exercise now, creating a docker bridge network. Again, let's first check sudo docker network ls. So if you see, these are all default ones. Now we'll create one more, and we can see network ls will list the fourth network here. So let's run this command, sudo docker network create my network. We are giving a name, my network, and just do network ls, and we can see there is a bridge network which is created, which has a name, my network. Now in this particular network, whatever containers will create, okay, while creating the container will say that create the this container in this particular network. So this is the first command. So what we are doing is running a container in a detached mode, giving a name to the container using hyphen hyphen name, and we are saying use my network which we created just now while running the nginx container. So we created first container in my network, and similarly we'll launch one more container. So if you see sudo docker ps, okay, there are two containers, and internally it's running on port 80. Okay, we haven't defined any external connections. And let's go inside container for one now. What I'll do is I'll create one, I'll log in. I'll have two terminals for the same host. So we have two containers running. Sudo docker exec hyphen it. I'm connecting connector one, container one, and attaching its bin bash. I'm inside container one now. Similarly, let's create means login inside the container two as well. So the ideal change. So I'm container two now. The first screen is for container one. The second one is for container two. So just do ping container one. So we don't have ping command. So iputils using iputil command will download ping command inside both the containers. So this command will download ping command inside both the containers. Iputils hyphen ping. So if I do ping container one, okay, I can see it's pinging. Similarly, ping container two. Okay, from one I'm pinging container 2, and from 2 I'm pinging container 1, and it's working. Why? Because both are in the same network which we created just now. So these were two simple exercises, nothing much. Okay,